is probably one of the most haunted homes in the world. It's certainly one of the most publicized haunted homes in the world.
I guess the Amityville Horror really is supposed to be me, because I'm the one that got convicted of killing my family. I'm the one who said did it. I'm the one that's supposed to be possessed by the devil.
Over the years, we've seen plenty of horror movies inspired by true crime. Whether it's The Conjuring or The Exorcist, these films have captured massive attention. But today, we're diving into a chilling case that often slips under the radar. While some may debate whether these stories are exaggerated, there's no denying that the Amityville murders were once a terrifying reality for the DeFeo and Lutz families. And just like always, we're going to dive deep into every chilling detail of this case, uncovering the terrifying events that continued even after the murders. But to truly understand it all, let's first get to know the DeFeo family, who once lived in the house at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, Long Island, New York. Ronald Joseph DeFeo Sr., or more commonly known as Big Ronnie, was born on November 16, 1930, to parents Rocco and Antoinette DeFeo. When he was younger, Big Ronnie was slender, handsome, and had a powerful gaze reminiscent of the legendary Rudolph Valentino. With his suave looks, he attracted the attention of Louise Marie Brigante. Born on November 3, 1931, to Michael and Angela Brigante, Louise had aspirations of becoming a model. She was beautiful enough to mingle with the best, including the famous singer Mel Torme. After a brief courtship, Big Ronnie and Louise married. The Brigantes disapproved of Big Ronnie, cutting all ties with the newlyweds until September 26, 1951, when their son Ronald Joseph DeFeo Jr. was born. He would later be known as Butch, and for this video, we'll be referring to him by that name. Growing up, Butch DeFeo faced many struggles. As the firstborn son, his father expected a lot from him, and Big Ronnie was not afraid to discipline Butch in harsh ways. One minute, he would hug his son, and the next, he would throw him across the room. Louise's brother, Michael Brigante Jr., would later testify at the DeFeo trial about an incident he witnessed when Butch was only 2 years old. He recalled, "We were all sitting down in the basement watching TV, and, I don't know, the boy had done something. All of a sudden, he stood up, the father, and just pushed the boy this way into the wall. The boy banged his head or part of his shoulder or something." As a child, Butch was extremely overweight, a problem that would persist until his late teenage years when he began using amphetamines. His school life suffered as a result, with bigger kids often teasing him, calling him names like the Blob, Bucky Beaver, and Pork Chop. Butch was not an only child for long. On July 29, 1956, Louise gave birth to a daughter, Dawn Teresa DeFeo. A few years later, on August 16, 1961, Louise gave birth to Allison Louise DeFeo, and then again on September 4, 1962, to Mark Gregory DeFeo. Sometime after Mark's birth, Louise decided to leave her husband for reasons that remain unclear. To win her back, Big Ronnie decided to express his love in a unique way. He co-wrote a song titled "The Real Thing," which jazz legend Joe Williams recorded in 1963 for his album One is a Lonesome Number. On October 24, 1965, Big Ronnie was blessed with a third son, John Matthew DeFeo. By this time, the family had moved from their Brooklyn apartment to a lavish home on the South Shore of Long Island in the affluent community of Amityville. Many wondered how Big Ronnie, working as a car dealer's service manager, could afford such a luxurious home. The answer was clear: his father-in-law, Michael Brigante Sr. In the early 1970s, Big Ronnie decided he wanted life-size portraits to immortalize his family. Once again, Michael Brigante Sr. picked up the tab, which was estimated to be at least $50,000. The portraits, painstakingly detailed, took over a year to complete. When finished, they hung in large golden frames on the staircase wall between the first and second floors of the DeFeo home. By this point, Butch had become increasingly troublesome as he got older. The DeFeos owned an auto body shop where Butch worked, but he spent more time at bars than actually working. His growing addiction to drugs and alcohol only made things worse, driving him to violence against his own family. There was even an incident where he pulled a gun on his father, and countless other times where he lashed out physically at those closest to him. Then, in the early hours of November 13, 1974, Butch completely snapped. Armed with a rifle, he moved silently through the house, murdering his family members one by one as they slept. What's truly chilling about this is that, despite the brutal killings taking place within just 15 minutes, the bodies showed no signs of struggle. Even more bizarre, the sound of gunshots didn't wake any of the other family members, or at least didn't rouse them from their beds. The bodies were found all face down on their beds, almost as if they had been carefully placed that way. To add to the eerie nature of the crime, the rifle had no silencer, yet aside from the family dog barking, none of the neighbors reported hearing a single gunshot that night. After committing the horrific murders, Butch calmly took a bath, got dressed for work, and then reported the crime, claiming he discovered the gruesome scene after returning home. He even went so far as to suggest that a mafia hitman, Louis Fellini, along with 2 accomplices, was responsible. However, a police interview soon revealed serious inconsistencies in his story. The next day, Butch admitted to carrying out the murders himself. Fellini, the supposed hitman, had an airtight alibi, proving he was out of state at the time of the killings. Under the pressure, DeFeo confessed, saying, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." He went on to explain how he took a bath, changed his clothes, and carefully disposed of key evidence, his blood-stained clothes, the Marlin rifle, and cartridges, before going to work like nothing had happened. It was claimed that Butch had been hearing voices that urged him to commit the murders. However, the prosecution brought in a psychiatrist who disagreed, diagnosing Butch with antisocial personality disorder. According to the psychiatrist, Butch wasn't hearing voices or possessed by another personality. He simply didn't see anything wrong with killing his family. Because of that, DeFeo was convicted on 6 counts of murder and sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms, which he continued to serve at the Sullivan Correctional Facility in New York until he died on March 12, 2021. There remains a theory that a second killer was involved, but that person was never apprehended. By the way, I post true crime and new cases here every week, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing. It helps a lot. Just over a year after the tragic deaths of the DeFeo family, the home on Ocean Boulevard was sold to the Lutz family, who would soon unknowingly step into a new chapter of horror. With the Amityville home marked by its horrific past, it's impossible not to wonder if the tragic events left behind some lingering, eerie energy, haunting the land where it all unfolded. But the Lutz family wouldn't have to wonder for long. They would soon share their own unsettling experiences in the home, and they weren't the kind of stories you'd expect from a typical housewarming. Although the price was a bit higher than their budget of $30,000 to $50,000, something about the house pulled them in. It was a beautiful colonial-style home with 6 bedrooms, a heated pool, and a boathouse sitting right on the Amityville River. Now, don't think for a second that the Lutz family wasn't aware of the horrific murders that had taken place there. In fact, they knew all about the house's dark past. But despite that, the Lutzes fell in love with the property and decided it was meant to be theirs. They bought the house for a bargain price of $80,000, never once thinking it was unlivable because of its tragic history. But what was supposed to be their dream home soon turned into a waking nightmare. The strange and terrifying events that followed were later shared with the world by author Jay Anson in his famous book, The Amityville Horror. Before moving into the house, George Lutz was a successful businessman, but after settling in, something changed. He became sluggish, cold, and irritable. Most bizarre of all, he started waking up at 3:15 in the morning every night, unable to get back to sleep. It wasn't just random. It was the exact time the DeFeo murders had occurred. One night, George was startled to see his 5-year-old daughter, Missy, standing by her bedroom window. But what sent chills down his spine was the eerie outline of a pig's face with glowing red eyes staring at him from behind her. He rushed into her room, only to find Missy sound asleep as if nothing had happened. Not long after, Missy started talking about a new friend, an imaginary pig named Jody. But was Jody really imaginary? In another bone-chilling moment, George looked at his wife, Kathy, as she lay sleeping. But something was horribly wrong. Her face had distorted and aged, as if she'd become a 90-year-old woman overnight. At times, Kathy seemed to undergo strange transformations, aging rapidly and looking like someone else entirely. Her mother even witnessed this unnatural change firsthand. But the strange events didn't stop there. The house seemed to have a mind of its own. Doors were ripped off their hinges, and in the middle of a freezing winter, a room was suddenly filled with flies. Outside, cloven hoofprints appeared in the snow right near their doorstep. Inside, green slime started to ooze down the walls, and then, in the basement, they discovered a hidden room that didn't appear on any of the house's original blueprints. The room was painted a deep, unsettling red and was only large enough for 2 people to sit close together. But what was even more disturbing was the faint, rancid odor that lingered in the room, adding to the overwhelming sense of dread that hung in the air. George even tried bringing their family dog into the mysterious basement room, but the animal refused to step inside. The usually brave dog backed away, tail tucked, and whimpered in fear. It was the only time George had ever seen the dog so terrified, as if it sensed something lurking in the shadows, something invisible to human eyes, but deeply unsettling to an animal's instincts. The eerie experiences didn't stop there. One night, George was jolted awake by the unmistakable sound of a band playing downstairs. The lively music echoed through the house, as if an invisible group was holding a late-night gathering. Confused and unnerved, he made his way to the living room to investigate. But the moment he stepped inside, everything went silent. No music, no people, nothing. Yet, something had definitely been there. The rug had been rolled up, and the furniture had been shifted, as if a dance floor had been cleared for a ghostly celebration. Desperate for help, the Lutz family reached out to a priest, hoping for some kind of blessing or relief from the terrifying events. However, the moment the priest stepped into the house, things took a dark turn. He was overwhelmed by a sudden, intense sickness and began to experience his own set of unexplained disturbances. Some force, seemed to be warning him to stay away. The impact of these events reached far beyond the Lutz family. Author Jay Anson, who would later write the Amityville Horror, recalled how meeting the priest convinced him that this was more than just a story. It was real. Because it was corroboration, Anson later said, this was actually happening to someone. This was not The Exorcist or The Omen. From there, I started to create the book. On January 14, 1976, after just 28 days of living in what they thought would be their dream home, the Lutz family experienced a night so terrifying that they made a split-second decision. They packed a few bags, left everything else behind, and fled, never to return. They didn't leave with the intention of never coming back. According to a 2005 interview with George Lutz, he emphasized that their departure wasn't planned. "We didn't wake up that morning thinking we were leaving for good. This was our home. When we left, we didn't know we wouldn't be coming back. We didn't know that everything we left behind, we would never see again." Their abandoned belongings, untouched and frozen in time, were later set to be auctioned off, as noted in a Washington Post article from 1979. The house that had once seemed like a fresh start had turned into something they could never return to. Determined to share their horrifying experience, the Lutz family recounted every chilling detail to writer Jay Anson, who would go on to transform their story into the instant bestseller, The Amityville Horror, in 1977. The book gripped the public, with the Los Angeles Times calling it both fascinating and frightening. But some critics believed its success wasn't just about ghosts and haunted houses. They argued that the story resonated with people because of the unstable political and economic climate in the United States at the time. Rampant inflation, rising interest rates, and a crippling oil shortage had left the country anxious and uneasy. As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the horrors inside the Amityville house weren't the only ones haunting the Lutz family. Their business was struggling due to the failing economy, and at the worst possible time, the IRS launched an investigation into their taxes. For many readers in the late 70s, this felt all too real, paranormal or not. Financial stress and uncertainty were things they knew all too well. By blending supernatural terror with real-life struggles, the Amityville Horror struck a nerve with the American public. It wasn't just a ghost story, it was a reflection of the fears people were living with every day. Some critics even argued that the book cleverly capitalized on popular horror trends of the time. The trope of a once-loving father turning violent and unrecognizable, as seen in The Shining. A priest reluctantly pulled into a supernatural battle, reminiscent of The Exorcist. The grotesque imagery of excessive vomiting, also a signature of The Exorcist. Even the eerie, small-town coastal setting echoed the atmosphere of Jaws. When asked if he had experienced anything strange while writing the book, author Jay Anson quickly dismissed the idea. "Leave it?" "No," he replied. However, he did suffer a heart attack soon after finishing it, though he insisted it was due to his smoking and idiot lifestyle rather than anything paranormal. But while Anson shrugged off any supernatural connection, eerie incidents followed those who got too close to the story. Several people who handled early copies of the manuscript reportedly had near-fatal or fatal encounters. One of Anson's friends had a fire break out in his car while driving the manuscript back to the publisher. Another friend and his son nearly drowned when their car plunged into the water. But when rescuers opened the trunk, the manuscript inside was mysteriously dry, despite only being stored in a simple clasped envelope. And the most chilling case? A woman who had been given the first 2 chapters to read died in a house fire the very night she received them. And among the charred remains of the home, the pages of the manuscript were found completely untouched. The terrifying tale of the Lutz family has since been adapted into several films, with the most famous being the 1979 version starring James Brolin. And in 2005, The Amityville Horror returned to the big screen with Ryan Reynolds stepping into the role of George Lutz, following in the footsteps of James Brolin from the original 1979 film. Both movies stayed true to the eerie backstory of the infamous house where a gruesome mass murder had taken place, but they each took creative liberties to crank up the terror. One major addition? A babysitter character who never appeared in the book. In the 1979 film, she watches the kids while George and Kathy attend a wedding. In the 2005 remake, the couple is simply on a night out. But according to the book, the whole family actually went to the wedding together. Then there's how the house itself is portrayed. The older film leans into the idea that the house is a sinister entity influencing Ronald DeFeo Jr. to kill his family in 1974. Meanwhile, the remake shifts the horror to the ghosts of the victims, making them the primary source of terror. The priest who tried to help the Lutz family also gets different fates depending on the version. In the book, he hears a voice commanding him to get out, and later becomes ill, eventually giving up on helping the family. The films, however, escalate the horror, showing him being attacked by swarms of supernatural flies and even going blind. While the 2005 versions took the most creative liberties, the 1979 film also made key changes, sometimes stripping important moments of their original context. But regardless of these differences, one chilling fact remains. An entire family was murdered in that house. Yet, despite the Lutz family's claims of paranormal experiences in 1975, no other owners have reported hauntings since. According to the Washington Post and real estate firm Coldwell Banker Harbor Light, 4 different families have lived in the house after the Lutzes. A previous owner even had the address changed to avoid unwanted attention. The last time the house went up for sale was in the summer of 2016, and it was sold in February 2017 for just over $600,000, significantly less than the $950,000 it was purchased for in 2010. As for the real murders that took place, while Butch was eventually found dead in his prison cell, there are countless versions of events and interviews he held before his death. In an interview from 1986, Butch claimed his sister Dawn killed their father and that their mother killed his siblings before he killed her. He later filed a motion in 1990 stating that Dawn and an unknown assailant were the real killers, and he only shot Dawn by accident during a struggle. Despite his shifting stories, his claims were always met with skepticism. In 2000, he spoke with author Rick Osuna, asserting that his parents plotted to kill him, which led him to join forces with Dawn and others in desperation. Butch's narrative continued to evolve, with inconsistent details about the events and unreliable witnesses. His claims, including involvement from his wife, Geraldine Gates, only deepened the mystery, with authorities and experts disproving many of his assertions. Now, if you're not a fan of paranormal activities, it's easy to lean toward the idea that Butch was simply a psychopath, driven by childhood trauma or addiction, who saw no problem in killing his family. But if the lingering souls of his victims did haunt the Lutz family, we can only hope they've found justice and peace. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe in what happened with the Lutz family? Or do you think nothing sinister occurred? Let me know. If you like the way we create these videos and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thank you once again for watching,